Okay, I'm going to make a video on bringing back to life an old steering wheel. I bought this from good old eBay. It's a 1920s wheel spider from, I think from a Model T, something like that. It's made of cast aluminium and it's all in pretty good condition, just a little bit pitted. So the idea is to clean all this up and repolish it, make a new mahogany rim, and I'm just going to do a video to run through the stages of that. Here's a couple of wheels I've done before. This one's on my current boat. That's a oak rim, with laminated teak spokes. There's about 6 layers of thin teak in there, all laminated with epoxy. It's got a brass rim around the outside and a little brass hub on it as well. And here's another one I made just as a test piece, really. It's got stainless steel spokes and there's a stainless steel rim running through the middle of the mahogany all the way around, so it's really strong. And that's got just an oak inlay around the outside of it as well. Never used it, but it's designed to fit on a Teleflex steering hub with the 6 bolts in the middle. So I've just thicknessed down a couple of bits of mahogany that I'm going to use. I've done them to the thickness roughly of the diameter that I want the rim. So I've taken them a little over 1 inch. I probably want to aim for about a 1 inch diameter when I've finished, maybe slightly smaller, but that'll be okay. They're fairly wide, about 2.5 inches wide. But by the time I've cut all the segments, there's going to be quite a lot of scrap. If you imagine, the more segments you have, the smoother the curve's going to be, so the less scrap wood you'll have. But I'm going to start cutting a couple of segments anyway. I think I'm going to want about 5 inches throat. I've just got to that from measuring the centre of the spoke to roughly halfway between the two. So I'm going to cut a few segments of that and see how the size works out. So I've cut 4 segments now, and it's looking about right. If you line up the middle of the spoke with that segment and the middle with that one, it's looking like I'm going to have enough material around the outside and on the inside to get a nice curve out of this. So I'm going to carry on and cut the rest of them, and we'll see where we're at. So that's all the segments cut down to size. The joints are all pretty tight fitting, and the edges are a little bit wavy here and there, but that doesn't matter because that's all going to get cut off anyway. And it's the right size too. Just place the spokes in there. See, it's all going to go together pretty well. The only other thing to do is to cut the joints on the edges. So these will have a little channel cut through here on both sides and a piece of wood in between the two, which will just help the joint be a bit stronger. So I'm just going to do that on the table saw, and then we can glue it up. So I've got the table saw set up here to cut these joints. There's a gap down this side with the fence, which is just going to cut 3/8 into the side of the mahogany there, and it's set to 1/2 inch depth, which is going to come in, so it's going to be like a 1 inch piece between the joints there. I'm just going to run that through now. I'll run it through twice, so we'll cut in 3/8 from that side and 3/8 from that side as well. So that's what you get. I'll just cut the middle piece out as well, probably with a chisel, and clean it all up, and that's going to give us our joint between the two segments. So I've just finished cutting the joints on all the segments, and that's what they come out looking like. I decided to cut a third one in the middle in the end because there was quite a lot of wood left in there and it's a lot to chisel out, so just leaves me these little fins which will probably break out pretty easily. and then chisel up nice and clean. So I'll get set up for that. Okay, so the joint width I'm left with is a little over 1/2 inch. So I've got a 1/2 inch chisel, and I'm just going to knock out all this loose stuff in the middle. Okay, and that's the joint that we're left with. So you can see the two parts will go together, and there'll be a piece through the middle which will make it really nice and strong. Okay, so I've got all the pieces cut, little bits in between the joints there that you can see. I'll just show you that from the side. That's how they go together. One piece in the middle. So it's pretty much ready to glue up now. So I'm all set up for gluing now. I've laid down this board just so that everything doesn't stick down, because you're getting a bit of a mess otherwise, and you can sometimes tear the grain out trying to get it back off the bench or something. I'm using West epoxy to glue it with the 205 fast hardener. It's the strongest stuff that I know of, and obviously strength is quite a key factor here. I'm going to use some dust from the belt sander with this resin just to help thicken it up a little bit, and to fill any little voids that are in there as well in the joints. A lot of people I think use the proper filleting compounds that West do, but I like to use some dust from the actual wood I'm using. You know you're going to get an exact colour match then, and I find if you pull it off of the belt sander it's nice and fine, so it works pretty well. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and start brushing it into the joints. Okay, so I've got the pieces all glued up, each joint, and the segments are roughly in place. They're not really pushed in together much yet. So I've got this band clamp which I'm going to use on it. It's normally for doing like picture frames and things like that. It has some little plastic fittings around it. I've taken all them off and I just use it like a strap which kind of goes around the whole thing. Don't want to put too much tension on it really. It's just to kind of pull everything in and hold it whilst you make sure it's all aligned. So that's everything clamped and glued together. I've brushed a little bit in the top of the joints, as you can see, just to fill any little gaps that might be there. I'll leave that now till tomorrow and then clean it up. Okay, that's everything cleaned up after gluing, and it's ready to start drawing the shape of the rim on now. Okay, so I've marked out the two circles for the rim, outside and the inside. I've got my 17-inch diameter, and I've made the thickness 1/8", so it's the same as the thickness this way of the wood, so that'll give me a perfect circle when I round everything off afterwards. Next thing I'm going to do is get the spokes lead on there and draw some shapes. I'm probably just going to take a bit of material out onto the spoke there. So I've got all the wheel shape drawn out now. You can see I've just done a little curve there where the spokes are going to land onto the rim, just to give it a bit of extra material to mount onto, and should look quite nice as well. So next thing is going to be to cut that shape out. Okay, so there's the wheel shape cut out. That's roughly what it's going to be like. Next job's going to be to just set these spokes down into the rim so that this is all flush on the back, and then I'll be rounding it off afterwards. Right, I've got the 4 points chiselled in now where the spokes are going to land, and the next thing is going to be to round it off on the router table. I've got this set up with a 1/2 inch round over bit with a bearing on the end, and I'll show you how I run that through. Okay, I've got the cutter set up, and I'm going to round off the front face both on the inside and around the outside. Okay, rounded off the front now on both sides. It looks quite nice. I'm getting ready to do the back side of it, but I need to be careful not to round over too much into these pieces, or else you'll see the edge of the spokes sticking through. So I've just marked some stops that I'm going to go up to and see how it looks when I've got to that stage. So that's the outside edge rounded off. I've taken them in as close as I can where the spokes meet, and I'll put a smaller radius just along this, and that's what the front side's like. And I've just got the inside on the back to do now. Okay, I've put in a 3/16 radius bit, and I'm going to use that just around on these tight areas. Okay, so that's the rim all cleaned up. I used 80 grit sandpaper just by hand to do the final bits of shaping, and went over it with some 120 afterwards, and we're ready to start putting the varnish on. Okay, so I'm ready to start the first coat of varnish. I'm using the Tonkanoi's Varnish Marine #1, and I'll probably do about 4 or 5 coats on this, but we'll see how we get on. Okay, so that's the first coat on. It's brought out a really nice dark colour in the wheel. So here's a final shot of the wheel. I did 4 coats of varnish in the end, and polished up all the aluminium. I may do another coat of varnish before I fit it to the boat, but that'll do for now. So that's it for the video on how I revive an old steering wheel.